Awesome. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the fourth and final part of the 2025 Winter Wildlife Webinar Series. The series is something that the Commission started brainstorming about 2 years ago, really to just highlight and explore the region's diverse wildlife, landscape, and conservation efforts. If you've been with us so far, you'll know in January we got a close-up look at the invasive sea lamprey in Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes region. In February, we got to look at key bat species in the region and conservation. And last month in March, we got to learn about the American chestnut tree and its genetic counterpart, the Darling 58, out of SUNY ESF. Today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on a variety of raptor species, especially their spring migration along Braddock Bay and Derby Hill. We'll be learning how raptors can act as an environmental barometer, the challenges that these species that we're covering face, and some conservation challenges past and present, and ways to get involved in hawk watching and bird identification. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speaker. Presenting today will be Daena Ford, president of Braddock Bay Raptor Research. She currently lives in, I hope I can pronounce that correctly, Honeoye Falls in New York with her family and 2 dogs. She's got a bachelor's of science in biology and a master's in secondary science education. And she's been working with the Braddock Bay Raptor Research Center for 30 plus years. Starting out as a college intern, and then she quickly became hooked on raptors after witnessing the spectacle of the spring migration, which I think we might have a few videos of in the presentation, and that occurs along the south shore of Lake Ontario. Daena's worked with raptors in both a research and an educational setting, both of which help the community learn more about the birds and the environment we share with them. Daena's education work with raptors early on led her to the classroom where she taught middle school science for 6 years. She currently holds education permits to care for 4 non-releasable raptors, which are used in programs conducted both on-site at Braddock Bay and throughout the community. Daena's also served on the board of directors for the Hawk Migration Association of North America from 2010 to 2018. And before I hand things off to Daena to take over, I do want to make note of a few housekeeping items. For the webinar, attendees, videos, and audio feed is going to be turned off to help conserve bandwidth. If there are any questions, please do type them in the chat box or the Q&A box below, and we will be happy to get to them at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded for later upload to the Tug Hill Commission's YouTube page, and links to those recordings will be sent out in follow-up emails. So if you miss a minute or you want to pass it along to a friend, don't worry, we'll be right on top of that. And I can say that we will have a very special feathered guests joining us at the end of this presentation as a last minute little benefit to those who've come here. So with that, Daena, take it away. I'm super excited.
All right. Thank you so much, Taylor. Very excited to be presenting tonight. This is the perfect time of year for this topic because we are right smack in the middle of spring raptor migration, and things are really gearing up along the lakeshore. And even if you've never been out to Braddock Bay before, you have other sites near you. And I'm going to mention Derby Hill, which is on the eastern end of Lake Ontario as well. Just look up every now and then, and you're going to get to experience it no matter what. So, a little bit about Braddock Bay Raptor Research. We are a nonprofit organization and primarily all volunteer effort that conduct all our research and education programs. We do hire a hawk counter, and I'll be talking a lot about our hawk watch, our hawk count in the presentation. But everyone else is a volunteer, including myself, and very dedicated to our mission of both research and education focused on the spring migration of the raptors or birds of prey that come through here and along the shore of Lake Ontario. So our research involves primarily our spring raptor migration count or the hawk watch. We also run a banding program, and we do some habitat surveys and owl roost survey because we do get an owl migration as well along the lakeshore. And then the Braddock Bay management area is a very important stopover habitat for all kinds of birds too, not just raptors. Okay. So the topic of tonight is, of course, raptors or birds of prey. And so we'll just go over briefly to make sure everyone's on the same page of what they're picturing here. Birds of prey all are kind of lumped into that one category based on a few key characteristics. They are known for their keen vision or eyesight. That is how they spot and track their prey. They are predators, so they need certain equipment to help them as a hunting bird and as a carnivore or meat eater. Their talons are what they use, or their feet. And you can see some very sizable feet on this bald eagle pictured here. Talons are used for grasping their prey and killing it. They do have that characteristic sharply hooked beak for tearing meat. And they, of course, have to be capable of pretty powerful flight in order to overtake their prey. Some of their quarry are ground dwellers, but many raptors are built for aerial maneuvers and grasping birds out of the sky. So all very impressive, on all very awe-inspiring. In terms of how many raptors do we have in our area, across North America, there are about 34 diurnal species, which are the daytime active birds. Those and around here in New York State, we see regularly, especially during migration season, about half of those, with a few extras showing up as rarities in the area during migration season too. And you're going to learn and meet a bunch of those in the presentation tonight. But they do include birds like hawks, falcons, the eagles, kites, osprey, harriers, and the New World vultures like the turkey vulture, the black vulture, and the condors too. Well, they don't have condors around here. They also include 19 species of owls in North America, but that's a whole nother topic. I'm going to stick tonight to the diurnal species that you're commonly going to see around here. Okay. So why? Why do we study raptors? Why do they matter in the world? And the key reasons are listed here as predators, being at the top of the food chain. They are very important in helping control prey populations and maintaining a healthy balance in the ecosystem. We are also at the top of the food chain as humans, and so a lot of what affects our predators out there could definitely affect people. So they're excellent indicators of environmental health. What can affect them can also affect us. So by watching and monitoring populations, that can clue us into possible issues out there that we may need to take a closer look at. They also are excellent at preventing the spread of certain diseases. They are natural pest control. Many of them are rodent eaters, and nobody likes to have rodents on their property or in their crops and whatnot. So they're excellent form of natural pest control. Plus, I haven't listed it here, but they have this just characteristics that draw people in. They're beautiful and they inspire a lot of individuals just to learn more about nature and appreciate it more as well. Our raptors are protected, like many of our bird species. We're going to talk just a little bit about how these birds are protected and some of the challenges they have faced. All raptor species are protected federally under three main acts or laws here. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which was established way back in 1918 to help protect populations. It protects not only the birds themselves, but all parts of the birds and nests and feathers, eggs as well. It is illegal to possess any of that without the proper permitting. We also have the Bald Eagle Protection Act, which actually also protects other species of North American eagle, the golden eagle as well, which is pictured here. And then there's the Endangered Species Act, which allows for extra measures put up to help protect our threatened and endangered species across the states. And every state has also certain measures put into place to protect raptors and other birds. It can vary between states. Here in New York State, one of the main things that helps protect bird populations or migratory bird routes as well are designated bird conservation areas. And these often have similar characteristics. They may have target species that live in the habitats there. or are supposed to live in the habitats there. So there's a variety of different bird conservation areas through across New York State. Braddock Bay Wildlife Management Area happens to be one of those. Okay. And despite all that protection these birds supposedly have, there still are many, many threats that these birds face and challenges in the wild. Not only just the natural challenges of being a wild bird and trying to survive, finding food, shelter, water, and habitat there, but there are other things that come into play that pose even more of a threat to some of these species. Habitat loss is always one of the biggest for any animal, any living thing, really. Taking away the habitat just takes away so much more. One of the most critical habitats that's endangered here in our state is the grassland habitats and even our forests too. So many of our birds depend on those for foraging, but nesting especially. So habitat loss has always been a big one to keep in mind. There's plenty of natural diseases out there, but a couple that have hit raptors pretty hard over the years and even more recently. West Nile virus, which kind of showed up back in 2001 or two, I believe, that's hit raptors pretty hard. They seem to have shown a little bit of resiliency over the years, but it's still something that's out there. And depending on the summer, and how the mosquito population is booming or busting, it can still be hitting, especially our red-tailed hawks, great horned owls, pretty hard. And avian flu, which everyone knows in the news these days, is another one that's a big concern to many birds, but raptors as well, especially the larger species that prey on things like game birds and waterfowl. There's no recovery really for any of these species of raptors, so it's definitely a concern that's out there. And there's a lot of things that get introduced into their environment that they have to face and deal with. And a lot of these are human caused threats here. We have collisions, whether that be with windows, buildings, cars, automobiles, even, excuse me, um, wind turbines as well. So lots of structural collisions can get in the way of these birds, especially during migration. Things like rodenticides and other pesticides that we might use, only they're not, species specific. Rodents carry that pesticide with them until they die, and when they're slow and sluggish, as they're building up to that death, they're easy capture for our predators, not just raptors, but local things like fox and even some of our pets. So that's always something to keep in mind if you choose to use that. Lead poisoning typically is caused by hunters using lead ammunition and not disposing of gut piles or leaving carcasses that might be contaminated with it, because some of our raptors are scavengers and that's an easy meal for them. So not knowing that there is lead in that food supply, it just takes a little small amount to cause mortality in these birds. So that is a concern that we're seeing. Other environmental contaminants like heavy metals, like mercury and things like that, that may be a result of some of our manufacturing or mining practices. That gets into the environment as well and gets into the food chain and can affect raptors' survival or their ability to fight off disease, their immune system. We also can see electrocution from power lines as these birds use those structures as perching along good sources of hunting grounds too. So sometimes that is a challenge for these birds. Flares. This is something that maybe people don't aren't too aware of. On our landfills, as they let off the methane gas and try to burn that off, birds often will be soaring over those unexpectedly, and they get their feathers singed at the very least, and that can cause a pretty big problem for a bird that depends on flight. And then with the things like entanglement with sports nets, like soccer nets, fishing line, things that you might not think of would be a big threat, but they are out there. These are some of the some of the list of things that raptors have to face out there on top of the natural survival requirements there. We actually will be doing a full-blown presentation on this topic at our Bird of Prey Days events in the end of April, which I'll mention a little bit later. Okay, so let's take a look at what are the kinds of raptors that live around here and take an introductory look at some of the more common species that you're going to encounter. And I'll talk about those, maybe give a quick little ID pointer for some of these species, but really just talk about when and where to expect these birds. Okay. Before we do that, though, it's good thing to understand that some of our species of raptors are here year round. I'm sure many of you have encountered seeing birds here in the winter, including red-tailed hawks, maybe even not your winter specialties. We can get snowy owls and rough-legged hawks in the winter, but some birds are here year round. But then there are others that are only going to be in the area in the spring and summer, and they're complete migrants, like the broad-winged hawk. Um, so when wanted to give you examples of the range maps that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's All About Birds website has. It's a great way to learn and kind of get your mind in tune with what should be around here at different times of the year. So when you look at the red-tailed hawks map on the left, you can see that this orange color represents the summer or the breeding range. Purple is year-round, and blue is the wintering range. And for something like a red-tailed hawk, it has quite a extensive year-round range here in North America. But some birds are more migratory, so some of them will move up north for breeding, and then come down in the southern states or even in New York State for wintering. And some of them will travel even further south for wintering, but because not the entire population leaves their breeding range, they're considered to be a partial migrant. But then on the right, you have something like a broad-winged hawk. They are a complete total migrant. As you can see, they have a very distinct summer or breeding territory and that orange, and wintering territory down here in Central and South America. So a very long distance migrant, very separate habitat needs for each season there. So this is why we won't see broadwings until around the middle of April. We're getting close to that. Okay, so I will mention as we go through species which ones are more migratory than others as we go along. And I like to start with the big birds. Some of our larger raptors here and most recognizable are the eagles, of course. The bald eagle being much more common. We do see golden eagles in New York State, but not quite as common, not nearly as common as our bald eagle, which is population is growing. Very unmistakable bird here and known to everyone, even those who are not birders, of course, because it is our national bird and it is used as a symbol of freedom and pride there. So typical adult bald eagle on the left with his huge long wingspan, a white head and white tail. Their wingspan can reach up to about 6 to 7 feet wide. They're a very large raptor indeed. Now, we are known, bald eagles are known for that white head and white tail, but they're not always going to show that. As a younger bird, juvenile bald eagles and immatures up to the age of almost 5 years old are all brown and dark with some mottling. So the photo on the right shows an adult bird with a juvenile or immature bird sitting to its left there, looking very different in coloring, but very similar in shape and size, of course, there. So if you see a really big dark brown bird, it's not always a golden eagle, which they are very dark brown. Juvenile bald eagles are brown in color. So um, there's the iconic nest. They're known for just building on top of these nests year after year. They have a very high site fidelity in terms of nesting, which means they tend to return to the same nest site year after year. This is a great image to show just how massive those nests can be and how small the eagle looks in that nest there. This is a great time of year to be looking and watching the nests is before all the leaf comes out because these birds are nesting right now. Um, they're they are showing up just about anywhere that has water within our state. They are primarily fish eaters, although they do scavenge a little bit. But near all our waterways, we're starting to see eagles more and more. Back in 1976, we had one pair of bald eagles within the state that actually wasn't even producing young. And thanks to the conservation efforts, reintroducing this species, now the state has, I believe they've lost, may even lost track, but it's right around 400 nests throughout the state. It's hard to get a final number on that these days, which is actually maybe a good thing, right? They're doing quite well. Okay, another large raptor, eagle-like in appearance sometimes from a distance, but look a little closer and you'll notice that there's no feathers on this bird's head and it's not white. This is our turkey vulture, and they have a featherless head because they are scavengers, so that helps them stay cleaner as they're eating a carcass. They don't have any feathers up there to get messy, and so that helps them stay cleaner. They're very recognizable in flight because of that dihedral or the V-shaped profile that the way they hold their wings and a full soar there. Plus, if you look at the way the coloring is on the underside, they're all dark on the top part of the wing with these silvery flight feathers, and that's something that shows up at quite a distance here. This is something unusual, maybe for some people, to see vultures sitting in a snowy tree. They tend to be a little bit more of a warmer climate bird, but their range has been expanding for years now. And we even have a little bit of a wintering population here in New York State. This photo of the two sitting in the snowy tree is actually taken across the street from my house a few winters ago. So I see them every winter. It's something that's a positive thing. They're starting to become more hardy. They're a species that's done well, even despite human population booms, because they are scavengers and they do eat a lot of roadkill. So they're excellent at keeping nature clean. They're like nature's garbage men and help do a great service to us. I wanted to share a video, and hopefully this will work. This is our Braddock Bay Hawk Watch, and this is what the vulture migration can look like here at Braddock Bay, and probably at Derby Hill too, I'm sure. We are right in the peak of vulture migration, and we had this record day a couple of years ago. We had about 10,000 turkey vultures come through in a single day, and this is just a little snippet of how the flight was that day, and just watching how graceful these birds fly in the sky makes up for what some people say they think is an ugly bird. I disagree with that, but they're super graceful in the air. Okay, so that worked. Hopefully you got to see that video. Another one of our big raptors, and this one's pretty much a true migrant, especially in our part of the states in the Northeast. We do not have osprey here in the winter. They are primarily fish eaters. and depend on open water where they can hunt for fish, whether it be on the coastline or around our lakes and rivers and canals even. The osprey is a very gull-like raptor in terms of the shape of their wings and how they hold their wings. They're very crooked shaped wings, similar to one of the larger gull species there. They are excellent fish anglers, we should say, fishers. And one of the ways I always tease people about this, one of the ways you know it's an osprey is if it's carrying its fish head first into the direction it's flying. They almost always turn their fish that way, and I guess it's to be more aerodynamic there. But osprey is another one that builds gigantic nests along our waterways. So you might want to check to see if you've got either eagles or osprey there. Another one to look forward to. We just started seeing osprey come back. Usually about the end of March, early April is when they show up here. Okay. Another raptor that's associated a lot with wetlands or grasslands as well is this bird, the northern harrier. Northern harrier used to be called the marsh hawk. And that's because they do like to be around marshes where they can hunt other rodents and small birds, sometimes some small waterfowl even too. They are ground nesting birds, which is why the female here on the left is more brown in color, almost pheasant-like in appearance. And the male in the middle is very much more dapper and dramatic looking. They're called the gray ghost. It's one of their nicknames because they're very, very gray on the back, white underneath. They have these black wingtips as well. The northern harrier is a really unique species of raptor. Not only do they depend on their vision like others, they also have very sensitive hearing. The photo on the right will show you the shot of its head and see how that have a partial facial disc, which gives them an owl-like appearance. And if you know owls, they have those big, beautiful facial discs, which are very important in helping with hearing. So harriers often are hunting lower to the ground over marshes and meadows with their heads down, not just looking, but listening for the rustling of the feet of meadow voles and other birds that might be around as well. So another signature field mark for these birds, whether it's male or female or juvenile, is that white rump patch at the base of the tail. That's something that will clue you in that you're seeing and watching a harrier fly. Okay. Next, we can get into all our different species of hawks. And there are a few different groups. We say if it's not one of the big birds, let's see if it's one of these three. It's either a booteau, which is the genus name of our birds like the red-tailed hawk, an accipitrine, or a falcon. So we're going to get into those three groups of raptors now. One of the most recognizable birds, probably the first hawk that a lot of people encounter in their lives is this one, the red-tailed hawk. Now, they don't have a red tail like cardinal red or bright red, Christmas red. It's more of a rusty color. And from underneath, it kind of looks more like a creamsicle color as well. But that is where they get their name. Red-tailed hawk is from the tail color of the adults. So the birds on the right and the left are both adult birds. The one in the middle, though, is an immature juvenile bird. So they don't have a red tail yet. They have a brown tail with a lot of barring in it. But the red-tailed hawk is a widespread species. They're found all across North America. This is typically what the eastern birds look like, with a little bit of a belly band of dark feathers across the belly on a light colored chest there, and that reddish brown tail. And if you travel around the country, you'll see a lot more variation in this species, where these birds get very, very dark, some of them very light, and all kinds of things in between. But this is typically what we see here. And these are the birds you're going to see a lot along the roadside. They are a bird of open space, hence the long soaring wings there. And they do like the edge of where the woodlands meet up with the fields. So that's often where they will nest, is at the edge of the woods. So they have good access to the fields for hunting small animals. But they eat a variety of things from rodents to birds to reptiles. And so they're very much a surviving species. They're not super specific in their needs, so they've been one to survive some of those environmental threats that others suffered from. Okay. A winter visitor and a spring migrant too is this bird, a long-winged, rough-legged hawk. They are called the rough-legged hawk because they have feathering all the way down from their legs to the base of their talons. And it's their genus or the species name Lagopus means hare foot or rabbit foot. So that's the resemblance to the appearance of their feathered legs there. Rough-legged hawks like open space, not so much the woodlands there. They nest up on the tundra. And so they're really, but they come down here in the winter, and this is one of our more common hawks, depending on the year. I think it was a good rough-legged hawk winter, especially up in the northern part of New York State. A friend of mine went out this winter, and one day, I believe he had between 30 and 40 rough-legged hawks in this one area that they were doing some drive around birding. So really neat species, subarctic species, more of a winter visitor. They're still trickling back up north this time of year, though, in the spring. The red-shouldered hawk is another one of our bootios, our long-winged hawks here. And red shoulders get their name from this reddish brown patch on their wing, which is really technically not their shoulder, but it looks like that in a photo. So that is where they get their name red-shouldered. But some of the more identifying features are this black and white striping or barring on the wings and the tail, that really very contrasting pattern, which almost looks like a checkerboard effect. So that kind of is the key feature that sticks out to me. Red-shouldered hawks are a species that tend to like a little more wetter woodlands and swamplands. So you'll find them in those areas for nesting. Their migration through this part of the state is usually mid-March through April. So they're one of the earlier migrants that comes through to set up territories a little bit later in the spring. Now, this is a hawk that we get very, very excited about because this is actually our most common migratory hawk in the Northeast, the broad-winged hawk, named for those wide wings and which help them with the soaring flight they need, not only to get around and find food, but for these long distance migrations. As you saw from the map I showed you earlier, they are true complete migrants spending their winters in Central and South America. They are a hawk that's more dependent on forests and woodlands because they go deeper into the forest compared to a red tail for nesting, often build their nest around a stream or a pond where they can find some reptiles and amphibians. Those are on their menu as well as small mammals too. Broad-winged hawks are known for coming through in huge numbers. The timing of their migration in the spring is usually they should start to show up around now, like mid-April, and they'll be trickling through all the way to the end of May. Um, and they look for those thermals to ride and give them lift they need so they can save energy on their long journeys. This is a photo of a kettle of hawks. Kettling describes the behavior of them riding a thermal and swirling around as they gain altitude, and then they'll eventually glide off to look for another thermal to get even higher. So that up and down swirling motion resembles a bubbling kettle. And I have a video coming up next of a kettle from last year's season. I don't know how many are in this one. It wasn't my job to count them, but I probably estimate maybe 300 or so in the sky here. They kind of look like a swarm of bugs. But as you see to the left side of the screen there, they're starting to stream. And that's the best time to get a clicker out and start counting them when they're in more of a straight line there. I'm going to play that, oops, one more time, hopefully, so you can just enjoy that. This is what's going to start happening very, very soon. Our broadwings are going to start showing up. I believe Derby Hill had their very first Broadwing either today or yesterday. Go by the Hawk Watch there. So it's pretty great spectacle to see. There they go, streaming off. Okay. So that rounds up our bootios, our wide-winged hawks. And now we get into two of the more common species of kind of backyard hawks or the forest hawks that chase little birds. If you have bird feeders, you might have encountered one of the next two species or maybe even both. The first one that's a little more common, especially year-round, is the Cooper's hawk. Cooper's hawks are one of the accipitrine species of hawk, which means they're like the true hawks. They hawk after birds. They hunt and bushwhack through the thickets, chasing songbirds mostly. And in Cooper's hawk's case, they might also take down some red squirrels or chipmunks as well. But a lot of birds are on the songbirds on these birds, raptors' diets. They have shorter, more rounded wings and longer tails for maneuverability through the thickets there. In the center, we have an adult Cooper's hawk with that rusty color barring on the chest and that dark gray cap there. And on the right, we have a juvenile Cooper's hawk with this vertical streaking on its chest. You can see just how long those tail feathers extend down there. That's usually a pretty good clue when you have a really long-tailed bird raptor. It could be a Cooper's hawk, or it could be the smaller counterpart, the sharp-shinned hawk. As I mentioned, they are often found in backyards looking and hanging out around the bird feeders. This one on the post there. But sharp-shinned hawk is a little bit more migratory than the Cooper's hawk, and they go a little farther south. In the wintertime, we've had a return on a banded bird, sharp-shinned hawk from, let me think, Colombia. I know we had a Cooper's hawk in Nicaragua, but so some of these birds travel some great distances for migration season. And sharp-shinned hawks are showing up now in greater numbers as well. But it is a species that we are watching very closely because their population seems to be in decline, especially in the eastern part of the US. And we have a special project at Braddock Bay Raptor Research to study these birds and a disease they've picked up related to a parasite they carry called capillaria. It's something we discovered through banding studies, and we're working and collaborating with other organizations to learn even more about it. So a lot of questions still, but these birds are a species that we're paying a little more attention to in terms of their migration numbers and the banding numbers that we're getting as well. Okay, so little Sharpie. So now we can get into the falcons. We do have three species of falcons that are commonly seen throughout the state. Some more common than others. The American kestrel is the smallest and probably the most common in New York State, although their populations are suffering a bit as well. But in terms of what they are, being a falcon species, you can tell that by their very pointed, angular, triangular wings there. Falcons are built for speed and swift maneuvers. So those triangle-shaped wings, those pointed wings, very streamlined bodies, help them take hot pursuit after their prey. The American kestrel is definitely one of our most colorful of raptor species in all of the continent here. The male is pictured on the left with that bluish gray on the wings there, a more solid color, rusty tail with a big black band at the end. The female is still very colorful, but different markings on the back and the wings. They do not have that blue patch on the wings there, and their tail is barred with rusty color and black as well. So there are one species where you can tell them apart by their coloring. Kestrels are a bird of open space. You can see them out around our farmlands, often sitting on the wires. They are a cavity nester as well, so they're very dependent on whether it's tree cavities or old barns. You can build nest boxes to help these birds out and provide nesting sites for them too, because of the lack of cavities in natural trees and such. Nest boxes can do a pretty good service to these birds. They are more of a rodent eater compared to their other two falcon cousins, the merlin and the peregrine. So they do eat a lot of voles and mice, but also large insects like grasshoppers and dragonflies too. So they're quite diverse in their diet. The next one up, size up, is the merlin. And merlins are very tough and tenacious little predators. They are just a little bit bigger and bulkier than a kestrel, but you can see very similarly shaped. Different color, not quite as colorful. This is likely a female, which is more grayish brown in color, a lot of dark on the tail, but with white tail bands there. These birds are primarily bird eaters. As you can see, this one on the right had caught a starling, which is almost about the same size as the merlin. So that's just a testament to their strength and toughness there. A lot is packed into that small package. The merlin is a species that actually is increasing in our area. Their population is growing and their breeding range is expanding a little further south into our territory, into New York State and the Northeast. They are a little bit more of a northern breeder, but they do come down here in the winter and they're starting to take up residence more and more in our urban and suburban environments. So we're seeing them in our cities and townships. They love starlings, are perfect size prey, so are house sparrows, and you know those are pretty plentiful, and especially in the cities. And they also take over other birds' nests, and one of their favorite ones to use are crows. Yep, they do not build their own nests. They borrow or use existing resources, and often crow's nests are one of the ones they commonly use and will take over. So keep your eyes out and your ears out for merlins in your neighborhood to show up. They're also very noisy. They have a very high-pitched call. You'll know they're in the neighborhood because you'll not just see them, you'll hear them. Okay, and the largest of our falcons and one of probably the most well-known raptors worldwide is the peregrine falcon. Falco peregrinus. Peregrinus means wanderer, and they do have one of the longest migrations. Some of these birds will migrate all the way from the Arctic, near Arctic, down to Argentina on this hemisphere. So they are quite the wanderer there. But peregrines are like the bald eagles and the osprey were one of those species that did suffer pretty serious declines due to the use of DDT in our environment and habitat loss at the same time. So these birds were on the brink of extinction, but thanks to efforts of conservationists to bring them back and support them, now you have almost every city in North America has a nesting pair of peregrine falcons. Rochester is certainly one of those cities, and if you follow the falcon cams at all, the Rochester certainly has them. Our Rochester birds now currently have 3 eggs, I believe. So we're watching to see them hatch. But they've been nesting downtown in Rochester for decades now. So it's there's nest sites in our cities resemble natural nest sites of the cliffs that they historically are known to use. Um, but you see that they are known for their speed, going the fastest animal on Earth, going at speeds of over 200 miles an hour in a dive after their prey. They are built for it. So very impressive birds. Okay. So that rounds out some of the main species you're going to see in our area, whether you go to a hawk watch or not. But I think one of the best ways to learn about raptors is to find a place, a migration spot, and let the birds come to you. So the hawk watch is one of our main things that we do at Braddock Bay. And a lot of what I talk about in terms of hawk watching is definitely going to apply to Derby Hill, which is closer to many of you most likely in that part of the state, and I'll talk about that. But what is a hawk watch? It's a fun term for something a little more scientific, known as a raptor migration count. And it is a way to monitor raptor populations on the long term. There's not a lot you can learn, about one season's worth of data, but when you take a years worth, maybe 5 to 10 years worth, and you start to analyze that, you can start to learn trends and see trends of different species, whether they're increasing or decreasing or stable. So it is an excellent way to monitor our predators out there. It's harder to monitor predators like grizzly bears and mountain lions, but they're important as well. What's great about a lot of our raptors is they have this migration and they do gather on certain spots, at certain predictable times of year, so you can monitor them and count them then. We do hire a counter, as does Derby Hill, but there are many more sites around the continent that are volunteer run. So it's an excellent way to get involved in citizen science project and help conservation efforts in that way. So, and it can be very educational and fun. If you're a visitor to any of the Hawkwatch sites, their counters, the people who go there are more than willing to share what they're looking at and help you learn as well along the way. So, where else can you go to see multiple species like these in one day? And this is what another great thing about hawk watching is you can not only just see one or two types of raptors, you can see sometimes up to a dozen different species in one day. And these are all photos that were taken at Braddock Bay over the years by our previous counter, David Brown. Okay. A little bit of information here about the Hawkwatch. Real quick, I know I'm running a little long on time, short on time, so I will try to speed things up a little bit here. But we've been doing our hawk counts officially since 1977, and Braddock Bay Raptor Research took over from the Moons and was formed in 1986. Our average season total for raptors is about 50,000 or more, a little bit more. So that takes place only from the months of March through May. A quick side note, we also do a summer raptor count in the month of August, which is actually a count of natal dispersal of mainly red-tailed hawks. So another fun time to come out and watch hawks. Here's the hawk's eye view of Braddock Bay. Our platform here is where we do the main count. The bay is out up here about the middle of the screen with Lake Ontario off in the distance there. So Braddock Bay, the landscape there, the management area has a wide variety of habitat from marshlands, wetlands to forest land and meadows and fields as well. So good diversity for a lot of different migrating birds. If you are a numbers person and want to know and put the numbers with the species, there's our last year's count for you. We are over average at about 69,000 total. You can see broad-winged hawks are our most common, as along with turkey vultures there. We get very good numbers of bald eagles as well, and all those different types of hawks I went through with you. The best days to come out to Braddock Bay are when we have southwest winds, because that'll push them up against our spot on the lakeshore, and you will see them in higher concentration. So that is the question. Why do we get so many raptors along the lakeshore, whether it's at Braddock Bay or Derby Hill? In general, these birds in the spring are heading in a northward direction, but they need to go around the Great Lakes because they cannot find the warm air currents or thermals that they need to give them lift and save energy. It'd be much they would waste much more energy by trying to cross Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and so on by flapping all the way across. So they instinctively know to go around and follow the lake shore. So if we zoom in where Braddock Bay is, we are very close to the city of Rochester, just a little bit northwest here at this letter here. As you can see, the shoreline takes a little turn to the southeast, and this creates a bit of a funneling or concentration point where birds gather in greater numbers before they continue to go eastward up and around Lake Ontario. Um, we are part of the Braddock Bay Wildlife Management Area, which much of is managed by the New York State DEC, but also in cooperation with the towns of Greece and Parma. I just like to show this to show you the route that these birds also take. It kind of follows the Lake Ontario State Parkway as they are going around all the water and avoiding that. But it's also key to show that the amount of habitat that's left is very crucial and critical to the bird's survival, not just raptors, but other species as well. This is a pretty developed area, typical suburban waterfront property. So every little parcel of natural land is really super important to these birds. Okay. Now for Derby Hill, and this is probably going to be closer for a lot of you who are tuning in tonight. Derby Hill is located near Mexico, New York, just a little bit to the, east of Oswego. And you can see this is another kind of turn in the shoreline here. So while Braddock Bay has good numbers on southwest winds, Derby Hill has good numbers on southeast winds. So you want to watch the weather and pick and choose which site you want to visit. This is what Derby Hill, the view there looks like. They are more located right on the lake there with a view, Lake Ontario here from this park bench. And they often counting looking over this field as well. Their site is managed and run by the Onondaga Audubon Society, so you can find more information about them on their website and their Facebook page, which are listed there. Also, the counter this year, who was our previous counter at Braddock Bay, does some really great daily summary videos on YouTube of what's been happening at the Hawk Watch. So encourage you to check out Lyco Birds on YouTube, and you will get a really good feel for what migration's like along these lake shore sites. Okay. Let's see. I have a few more little tidbits. And I'll let Taylor give me the hook if needed, but probably can get through this. I don't want to overstep our boundaries here. Are we good to go to continue with some slides, Taylor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it
I
won't take
think
me
like
much
as long
longer.
as like I'd say even like an extra 15 minutes because of the surprise guest, I would definitely not be opposed.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, thank you. Because I did want to make sure everyone was aware, like how, what the purpose of collecting all this migration data is for. So we are Braddock Bay, Derby Hill. We're one of over 300 sites across North America that are part of the Hawk Migration Association that monitor raptor populations. So the map with all these red dots, every red dot is a Hawkwatch site. So you can see where some of these places are concentrated. Lots of them in the Northeast and along, the mountain ranges there, but also along the coast. The Gulf Coast has quite a big migration as well, as do out west along the Pacific or even through the Rocky Mountains. And there's all smattering of sites across the Great Lakes too. So what do we do with our data? First, it is actually entered from the field to an online uh, app or a website here called Trektellan. And Trektellan is used by um, bird migration counts all over the world. So it's kind of neat to get on there and see what kinds of birds are showing up in Sweden and Africa and North America there. But that syncs up with the Hawk Migration Association's database at hawkcount.org. And I'm going to talk about this website quite a bit as a way to follow the migration. So all of our data from over the years is on Hawk Count. And the next step that is taken with the data, one of the main projects that it is used for is this Raptor Population Index project. And this is a collaboration of not just Hawk Migration Association, but also Birds Canada, Hawk Mountain, and Hawkwatch International. They have a team that analyzes all the Hawkwatch data every 5 years or so to get trends and analyze the population status of every species of raptor in North America. So if you really want to know how your birds are doing, your raptors are doing, check out the rpiproject.org and you will find lots of information there. Okay. And this is a classic example of how raptors can help us monitor how's the environment doing, what's going on. Raptor migration counts can give you a clue that something might be wrong or something might be improving. So a little bit of history about our iconic bald eagle. Back in 1977, the first official count for Braddock Bay, only 3 bald eagles were counted for the entire season. Right around that time, though, was when conservation measures were put into place and they started the reintroduction of the species within New York State. And it didn't take too long to start to see that population increase. As you can see how the numbers go up over these certain years. 1993 was the first season to break 100. And that was actually my second year with Braddock Bay Raptor Research. So still kind of rare to see eagles back then, but they were on the rise. Now we look to get over 100. We often get over 100 bald eagles in a single day. And even now, even keeps going, keeps growing. Our records for bald eagles now, 2022, we had a single day total of 215 birds on May 20th. And at a new season total record of over 1,500 birds. So it just kind of shows how the population has been growing and reestablishing itself across the state. This graph is one of those examples that comes from the Raptor Population Index project and how it puts the data in picture format so you can really understand and start to see the changes in migration numbers over the years here. And this is specific to Braddock Bay, but they are all the sites. You can look at any of the sites. You can look at Derby Hills numbers, or you can go by species. Say you are interested in kestrels or redtails, you can look that up. Okay. Hawk watching is also super fun. As I mentioned, it's a great opportunity to get out, get groups out. We do a lot of field trips, and even when raptors aren't migrating, there's usually something around to see there. So I encourage you to keep up with the migration or check things out if you haven't been doing this yet. Use the Hawk Count website, hawkcount.org, to check out your favorite site here. When you get to the home page, you'll see the daily total listed from all the sites that are currently counting. So not just us, but places even down in Costa Rica and Colombia, Texas. You can check out the birds that are flying and all over the continent there. And you can look at the monthly totals. This is an example. This is our totals for April so far up until yesterday. And you can even go through the daily totals if you'd like, and there'll be a summary of what's been seen. There's also maps to show you where different Hawkwatch sites are more locally, or span that out. And if you're traveling, you want to know. If there's any Hawkwatch sites in Minnesota or Texas, you can check out the maps and look at the sites that are there. Um, and another fun tool that they have there is to look at what's viewable now, the timing of species. They have these great little graphs to show when the peak of migration is for each species. And so you can kind of time your visits to see the most or target species that you have. Okay, and I think that's going to wrap that part up with a couple of announcements about some of the events coming up. We do have our festival, our celebration of the migration in a couple weeks, April 25th through 27th, weekend long Bird of Prey Days celebration. So come on out, it's open to everybody if you can. We also be running an online auction to help raise some funds. All that information is on our website at bbrr.org. And I did want to mention for Derby Hill, they also are having a Migratory Bird Day event in May, on May 11th. There'll be information about that on their website. I know they'll be holding some bird walks, meet the hawk watcher, some activities for kids as well. So if you're closer to Derby, you can certainly want to check that out as well. Okay. And please, follow us. If you've learned a little bit or are intrigued and want to know more, check out our website on our Facebook and Instagram accounts and keep up with what we're doing. Okay. All right. That's all I've got for the slideshow part. And I do have a special guest too. So I'll go ahead and um, stop sharing.
Hmm.
All right. And I'm going to go off camera for just a short minute to get our guest out here. Okay.
Okay. All right. While Dana does that, I would like to encourage everyone. We're going to start going through the questions as when she brings our guest out. But if you have anything that maybe occurred to you during, feel free to take this time right now to type it into the chat. We will get to pretty much all of them, I would expect. I'd say give it another 15 minutes or so for question and answers because I figure we didn't want to miss this. So, and I think I saw one person was in attendance when we were testing the camera to make sure that you would have a perfect view. So some of you may, I think at least a couple of you may be able to recognize this bird, and maybe from the presentation, I know this bird was covered in the presentation, so you may be able to recognize and guess exactly what she is.
Hey, here we go.
There we
All
are.
right. Can you see us okay?
Yes, we can. Can you tell us who's with you there?
Perfect. So this is our broad-winged hawk. We have 4 education birds that we use for programming. Our broad-winged hawk is one of them. She's one of our heavily used bird. She's such a great bird to use. She came to us because she had been hit by a car and has some permanent injuries that did not heal back to normal. So she is actually missing her left eye. So there's the left side. And I'll show you her right side so you can see her beautiful brown eye there. Can you see that?
Yes.
um, and she also has a little wing damage, so she's not fully flighted and has some issues with that. But she's been with us for almost 8 years now. And she came to us as a juvenile bird, so she is going to be turning about 9 years old this summer. Um, so she's been at this for quite some time. But a great example of a raptor. I talked a little bit about broad-winged hawks already, but this will give you a chance to kind of see one, in real life, not just a still photo there. I'll try to get a little closer so you can see her talons. Broadwings are a medium-sized raptor, so their main prey are things like chipmunks, maybe frogs, some snakes too. And they're more of a perch hunter, so they will just kind of sit and wait for something to gather or come by and then swoop down and catch it, often building their nest near a stream or a pond as well, too. You can see her beautiful face there with their sharply hooked beak. Some of the key markings there, you can see that wide stripe on the tail there. That's a good field mark for a broad-winged hawk. They have pretty long wing tips. It doesn't, so you don't see much of that tail, that short tail, very long wings um, on these birds here. So,
There are a couple of questions.
yeah.
With what's the lifespan of a broad-winged hawk?
So I'm trying to remember the record for a banded broad-winged hawk is I think somewhere around um, 18 to 20 years. That's probably pushing it for longevity. So probably average maybe 15 to 20 years in the wild. They can live a little bit longer in captivity. They typically do, but so I guess she's about probably middle age right now. What else
And
do we have?
I do see Betsy Nickel, you've had your hand raised. Let me allow you to talk. Do you have a question, ma'am? And I think
Betsy, you're muted if you're trying to talk to us.
okay. Well, if you still have a question, please do feel free to put it into the chat. I'm gonna get to a couple other questions, and then I'll get back to the raised hands. All right. So I saw one right at the beginning. There was a question. What is your view on why vultures are frequently seen early morning facing the sun with wings held out while on the roost? I think I know this one, but I want to hear your
Yeah,
expertise.
yeah. Always fun to see that. So what they're doing is they're warming their bodies, partly warming up, partly also the sun is purifying or sterilizing their wings. Birds really depend on sunlight also to help keep their feathers strong and equipped for flying. This broadwing actually will do that posturing in the sun often on a nice warm day. And it's just really a way of kind of strengthening their feathers. But vultures, the turkey vultures will do that, especially in the morning. Because they're bigger birds, they may have eaten a pretty big meal the day before. They need a little extra warmth and heat to get things moving before they can get going. They will sometimes wait for the thermals to get going as well so they can get more lift. Having such a wide wingspan, they really need the help of the lift of the thermal activity. So you'll see that they may wait a little bit before they get up and start moving. But it's always a fun thing to see. They love the sun.
I see one more hand raised. Joyce Renzo, I'm gonna let you talk here. Do you have a question? And you are muted, so just make sure you unmute yourself. Joyce, you're muted. Do you have a question for us?
Taylor, we do have a question in the webinar chat. Will osprey take prey other than fish?
Not to my knowledge. I think they're primarily fish eaters. So that's why they're always around water. Yeah, unlike the eagles, bald eagle that will take other prey, or they will feed on carrion. So, but they believe ospreys are primarily fish eaters. Yeah.
And I have a couple questions in the Q&A. Okay, we got that one. Is data shared between Braddock Bay and Derby Hill, or I wonder if that's addressed by those centralized websites you showed us?
Yeah, we don't share it directly with each other, but we can see, what the totals are throughout the season. We often compare notes, or we may be in contact with each other. We tend to see a lot of the birds come to us first, that may be heading from the west, up and around. So let's say we get something rare like a Swainson's hawk or a Mississippi kite or a black vulture. It's a good chance that they would see it the next day. So we might put the word out and say, hey, be on the lookout for those species, or they can get a good idea, when the big broadwing push is coming. Because we usually will get a good movement before they do. Although they sometimes get, and often will get, um, good different groups of birds because they are more east. They'll get birds that are coming from the eastern part of the state or New England, on the edge. And they'll get pushed closer to Lake Ontario on southeast winds. So they're going to get some birds that we don't see at all, just because they're taking a different route along the flyway. But yeah, we like to joke around that they're like our rivals, but it's really we really are, doing the same thing for the same purpose. But there is a little jealousy sometimes where we're like, shoot, they got this and we didn't, and
Two
vice
rival schools on
versa.
opposite sides of town, kind of.
Yeah, yeah. So or like when some of our fans, our friends go to Derby Hill for the day, we're like, traitor, like, why aren't you at Braddock? But it's really all friendly, and it's really what we do, what they do. There's fantastic work, it's all for the same purpose, monitoring these birds.
And I think I have one more question. For the birds that are migrating north, where do they cross over to Canada? Is it at the St. Lawrence River or somewhere else farther north?
Yeah, so they're gonna go right up and around that end there. So they can cross the St. Lawrence up through there. Sometimes birds, when they're coming closer to our area, um, as they're going up along the Lake Erie shoreline, some of them turn and go through like the Niagara Peninsula, they call it, and skip, cut through where Lake Erie and Lake Ontario meet. There's another hawk watch in that spot. So some of the birds end up going west and they don't come to Braddock, will go along the Lake Ontario shore. So they cross those land bridges, so to speak, to get further north. There's a lot more habitat up in Canada, forests where they breed, which is why so many of them continue to go that direction. We certainly get some that stay, in our state and in New England, but so many more go up into Canada too. So, yeah.
Well, other than lots of kudos in the chat, I think that's all the questions that we have so far. Thank
Okay.
you very much for presenting today, Daena, and taking a little extra time to show us your little friend there. I think this is the first time I've seen a Broadwing talk, so
Yeah.
very, very excited to see her.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. And I hope to see some of you out at our Hawk Watch or, go out there and keep your eyes to the skies and enjoy the migration.
Yeah. And hopefully, we'll be able to get out there fairly easily and no more snow. So
Yes.
that'll be good.
It's coming. It'll be, it
It'll
can
be
only get
years.
better. Right.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Well,
Dana.
thanks again,
It was
Daena,
great.
and have a good night, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.